Recently, there have been waves in the South China Sea, and the drums of war are sounding for the trilateral joint military exercise involving the United States, Australia, and the Philippines. Named Shoulder to Shoulder 2024, the scale and strength of this exercise has astonished the world. Warships are lined up like castles, aircraft roar across the sky, rockets are ready to launch at any moment, and the entire sea surface is witnessing the eve of a fierce war. The most eye-catching part of the sensational military exercise was a live fire exercise. The three countries' troops launched a concerted attack on a decommissioned oil tanker named BRP Lake Kaliraya. The supply tanker, which was originally manufactured in China and donated to the Philippines in 2014, was retired in 2022 due to high maintenance costs. With guns blazing and missiles streaking across the sky, the 4,700-ton behemoth sank into the sea within 2 hours, buried forever beneath the waves. A metaphor emerged. Just like the Chinese-made warship, which eventually sank under the weight of all its burdens, the ambitions of the Chinese Communist Party in the South China Sea will also collapse under the counterattack of peace-loving forces. In this exercise, the United States, Australia, and the Philippines showcased their capabilities. The Philippine Navy's Jose Rizal class guided missile frigate, equipped with South Korean-made SSM-700K anti-ship missiles, hit its target with precision. Israeli-made Spike missiles were launched from the Philippine Navy's Acero-class missile boats, while Desert Tech's 12.7mm M2 heavy machine guns roared, saturating the target with attacks. In the sky, awe-inspiring weapons were equally formidable. For the first time, U.S. Air Force F-16 fighters joined forces with the Philippine Air Force's FA-50 fighters, each launching Baby Bull missiles. The U.S. AC-130J gunship circled overhead, ready to deliver the final blow to the target vessel. The three forces wove a three-dimensional web of firepower, demonstrating perfect coordination. The U.S. Navy's P-8A anti-submarine patrol aircraft and MQ-9 drones, along with the Australian Air Force's E-7 airborne early warning and control aircraft, complemented each other, keeping the battlefield situation in full view and ensuring smooth information sharing and command among allies. Land-based firepower was a highlight of this exercise. The Philippine military deployed the Atmos self-propelled howitzer for the first time, precisely striking maritime targets. This marks the Philippine military's ability to use vehicle-mounted artillery systems for anti-ship operations, greatly enhancing flexibility on the future battlefield. The U.S. military also put on a great show. They deployed the Typhoon missile weapon system to the Philippines from afar and seamlessly linked it with the Marine Corps' TPS-80 radar. With radar guidance, Tomahawk missiles and Standard 6 missiles can accurately hit targets hundreds of kilometers away. Deployed around the South China Sea, they are enough to clamp down on all Chinese military facilities in the region. The scale and scope of the U.S.-Philippine military exercises continue to expand, covering almost all the waters off the northern and western Philippines, from air to the sea, from Palawan Island to Luzon Island. The three-dimensional network of land, sea, air, and electromagnetic full-dimensional strikes is taking shape in the South China Sea. China's new operating space in the area is gradually being eroded. For Beijing, this is definitely not good news. On May 5th, a photo posted on Facebook by Philippine military spokesperson Colonel Mike Logico exposed the targeting and hostility of the U.S.-Philippine military exercises. In this exercise scenario diagram, there is a model of a vessel resembling the Chinese Navy's Liaoning aircraft carrier placed within the Philippines' 12 nautical mile territorial baseline. Helicopters, surface ships, and what appears to be the U.S.-made Humvee anti-ship missile launchers surround the Liaoning, making the targeting intentions obvious. Even more threatening is the text accompanying Colonel Logico's post. Done with our rehearsal of concept, we are ready to execute. This image is as powerful a blow to China as any. It clearly and bluntly tells Beijing, the U.S. and the Philippines consider you their number one hypothetical enemy and are ready to deliver a deadly blow at any time. The South China Sea is no longer your backyard, and the Philippines is no longer a country you can bully at will. With the assistance of the U.S. military, the island nation, long seen as weak in the South China Sea, has been able to demonstrate its prowess in anti-ship warfare, significantly enhancing its counter capabilities. The awakening of the Philippines could be the spark that ignites a military domino effect in the South China Sea. Countries such as Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia, which also have territorial disputes with China, may strengthen their military forces to defend their rights, inspired by the Philippines' example. Such a chain reaction is enough to shake all of China's vested interests in the South China Sea. A new military landscape in the South China Sea is taking shape. To demonstrate their determination to encircle China, the U.S. military is deploying forces across the Philippines and intensifying military planning. In the central part of the Bashi Channel, an island called Itbayat is particularly noteworthy. It is only 150 kilometers from the main island of Taiwan, and the U.S. and Philippine navies and marines frequently conduct joint training there. Heavy weapons and cutting-edge equipment continue to gather here. The strategic value of the airport at the southern end of Itbayat Island is self-evident. With a 1,000-meter runway, it can still accommodate for rapid deployment of the HIMARS long-range missile artillery system to strike surface targets at any time. Aircraft taking off from here can compete with the Chinese Air Force in the airspace over the Taiwan Strait. For China, this is a heavy blow. On May 6th, the U.S. Marine Corps and the Philippine Navy Marines launched the joint exercise. U.S. CH-47 heavy transport helicopters continuously delivered combat supplies to the airport, and fully armed U.S.-Philippine Navy Marines quickly jumped out of the cabin, formed combat formations, and conducted aerial reconnaissance and anti-reconnaissance drills. In the La Paz sand dunes northwest of Luzon Island, a fierce anti-landing exercise is underway. The beach is filled with artillery fire, aircraft roaring overhead, and a variety of weapons forming an impenetrable barrier. Over 600 elite U.S. and Philippine soldiers are eager to test various advanced weapons on the beach. Heavy 105mm and 155mm howitzers are ready to deploy. Tank units are poised to strike. Navy speedboats swiftly glide over the sea, armed to the teeth with machine guns, anti-tank missiles, and anti-armor weapons, creating a formidable sight. Above them, MQ-9 drones hover. This is a joint anti-landing exercise between the U.S. Marine Corps and the Philippine Navy Marines. According to reports, the simulated enemy was beaten badly and forced to flee into the sea. There was a time when the Philippines could only swallow its pride in the South China Sea. Today, the Philippines' anti-landing exercises set an example for all small countries. They declare through action. The South China Sea is no longer China's backyard, but the starting point for peaceful forces to resist tyranny. Subic Bay is another sore spot for China. It is home to a large number of U.S. forces and is considered the forefront of the U.S. presence in the South China Sea. On May 1st, the U.S. HIMARS was airlifted by MC-130J transport aircraft from Subic Bay to San Vicente on Palawan Island. It was seen leaping lightly onto an air-cushion landing craft, hiding in the well deck of an amphibious transport dockship, USS Somerset, and quietly sailing along the coast of Palawan Island. When drones spotted hostile targets, the HIMARS reappeared, boarded the air-cushion landing craft, and set up camp on a beach near Rizal. Rockets streaked across the sky, precisely destroying the targets. Mission accomplished, it quickly withdrew to a safe area. On the same day, two 52H bombers from Guam flew over the skies of Hongyan Island from south to north. Although they were only simulating participation, their unique silhouettes still provided a strong visual impact, demonstrating the escalation of U.S.-Philippine military cooperation. The Chinese military responded by deploying Y-8 electronic warfare aircraft, Winglong 7 drones, J-11 fighters, and a Chinese Navy reconnaissance ship, lingering in the waters west of Palawan Island. The Philippines, once considered weak in the South China Sea, is rising rapidly. In recent years, they have spared no effort to strengthen their military power, attempting to reverse the imbalance of military power in the South China Sea. Introducing BrahMos supersonic anti-ship missiles, purchasing 3,200-ton class frigates from South Korea, and buying JAS-39 fighters from Sweden, all of this is preparing the Philippines to participate in the South China Sea game. The effort undoubtedly makes Beijing uneasy. They, who have always held the military advantage, probably never dreamed that one day the Philippines would be able to use force to curb China's ambitions. Once this trend takes hold among regional countries, it will overturn China's vested interests and reshape the order in the South China Sea. For Beijing, the rise of the Philippines may just be the beginning, and it may well be the beginning of a collapse. In response to the joint military exercises involving the U.S., Philippines, and Australia, China has not hesitated to make a strong response. The main fleet, consisting of 4 10,000-ton Type 055 destroyers, conducted live fire drills in waters near Palawan Island, intending to deter the US-Philippine-Australian exercises. The Chinese Air Force also followed suit, deploying Y-8 electronic warfare aircraft, Winglong 7 drones, and J-11 fighters to conduct aerial reconnaissance missions, attempting to understand the deployment and intentions of the three countries' forces. At the same time, the 815A electronic reconnaissance ship and naval surface vessels formed a joint reconnaissance network to gather intelligence near the exercise area. China has deployed many traps in the South China Sea, which could be used to provoke incidents during the exercises and then allow them to deny responsibility. They might say that the helicopters fell by themselves or the submarines sank by themselves. China is definitely capable of doing this, so the possibility of conflict is higher. A few days ago, senior military officials stated that they will continue to deploy more military forces to the Asia-Pacific region to ensure overwhelming control of the South China Sea from the outset of combat. It can be seen that the US is considering how to quickly take control of the region, while China seems to be unable to wait and is making its final efforts. Through joint sea-air reconnaissance operations, China is showing its strength to the US, Philippines, and their allies. This is not only because Putin's nuclear submarines provide strong support, but also because Putin's recent re-election and military parade have added a tough political atmosphere. At the same time, Xi Jinping is facing a relative decline in global strategic position, and the country is experiencing a series of severe social and economic challenges, including protests. To divert this internal pressure, China urgently needs to shift domestic and international attention through small-scale conflicts and inject a shot of confidence into the nation. Through the smoke of the South China Sea exercises, what we see is the comprehensive upgrade of the US Asia-Pacific strategy. The South China Sea is just a corner of this big game. From the Pacific to the Indian Ocean, from the Taiwan Strait to the South China Sea, the US is constantly strengthening its military presence, weaving a containment net against China. The net is woven from a multitude of bilateral and multilateral relationships. The US-Japan, US-South Korea, and US-Australia relationships are closely linked. The US-Taiwan, US-Vietnam, US-India relationship are mutually reinforcing. By continuously strengthening these allied relationships, the US is gradually circling China. Arms sales, military exercises, and base construction all point to the same goal: to contain China's strategic ambitions. In this network of alliances, Beijing's living space is constantly being squeezed. By linking the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait strategies, Washington has constructed an invisible strategic containment net, restricting China's activities to within the first island chain. All signs indicate that this strategy has taken shape. Once the war breaks out, China will be surrounded on all sides. This is nothing short of another Cold War situation, and the strategic situation is far more unfavorable for China than it was for the Soviet Union. The South China Sea is awakening. Countries in the region are no longer willing to remain silent, but are taking action to defend their rights. The grand military exercise is a concentrated display of this courage. The Philippines' counterattack, Vietnam's resistance, Indonesia's perseverance all indicate the profound changes in the situation in the South China Sea. Now Beijing must ask, can the South China Sea continue to serve as its springboard for hegemony? The Philippines' military exercises, the U.S. intervention, sound the alarm for the development of the situation in the South China Sea. If China remains unrepentant, it will inevitably push the region to the brink of war. By then, its global strategy and the regime itself will face unprecedented pressure. Shoulder to Shoulder 2024 is a historical turning point in the rewriting of the geopolitical map of the Asia-Pacific region. Countries in the region are rising up in resistance, and the US-China rivalry is becoming increasingly heated. The play has just begun. The Philippines' counterattack is just the first step, and China is now faced with a choice.